Welcome to Explorer Classroom. My name is Gibbs Kuguru. I am a shark scientist, a National Geographic explorer, and I will be your host for today. At National Geographic, we believe that anyone can be an explorer and that you have the power to make a difference in the world no matter how old you are. Explorer Classroom is here to inspire you with stories from the field and connect you with our National Geographic explorers live to answer your questions. Before we get into today's lesson, I'd like to welcome all of the following classes who are joining us today, especially Irwin Elementary, Kenilworth Junior High, Ainsworth Park Elementary, Fulton School, Hardin Park Elementary, Medina Family Homeschool, Sunnyside Elementary, 20 Wells, Windber Middle School, Linton Stockton School District, Wirtland Middle School, and Viola Desmond Public School. We are so glad you are here joining us today. Today, our explorer is Justine Ammendolia. Justine is a plastic pollution researcher focused on investigating how tiny plastic particles, known as microplastics, find their way into and affect our ecosystems. Justine's most recent research has taken her to Sable Island, a tiny island off the coast of Nova Scotia in eastern Canada. She spent 5.5 weeks on the island as a microplastic detective, collecting data, searching for plastic pollution, and getting to know the island's wildlife. Justine will be joining us live from a lab in Toronto, Canada, but first she's going to show us what life is like on Sable Island. Let's connect with Justine.
Hey everybody, my name is Justine Ammendolia and I'm a National Geographic explorer, and I'm calling you all the way from Sable Island. Sable Island is a tiny island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and it's so remote that only 12 people live here at any given time. So actually all the wildlife on the island outnumbers the people. Behind me you can see actually 2 puddles of seals, and you can kind of hear them calling out in the distance, and there's a lot of seals on island. There's like wild horses here too, about 500 of them, and seabirds and a whole bunch of insects and really beautiful wildlife. Sable Island is a place that's really hard to get to, and what I'm really excited about, although I love seeing the wildlife, I'm interested in trash and garbage and all that good stinky stuff that we throw out. And what I'm trying to do for National Geographic is figure out how much plastic is traveling here, not by water, but by the air around us. Because plastic can get so small, it can come out to small places like this, like Sable Island, and actually contaminate the air. So join me on my National Geographic adventures on Sable Island as we dive into trash and we learn all about the wildlife that I'm sharing my home with. Hey everyone, so you're joining me for lunch at my favorite picnic spot. I climbed all the way up the sand dunes, so basically I'm on the top in between all these beautiful blades of grass, and I'm just having a little snack. You can see it over here. So it's actually like pate, which is like a meat paste, and really hard crackers, and these travel really well for the fields. And you might think it kind of looks like dog food. It's not the greatest, I have to admit, but it really does the job and it fills you up. And you can see I'm joined with company, and I have a really nice view. All those little black spots over there are seals, and they're just hanging out by the beach, and I'm joining them for lunch. Hey everyone, so thank you so much for joining me on the roof. We are currently a full story up, and we're actually like on top of a building, and what's really cool is I work here every single day. After I have breakfast, I come up and hang here, and what I'm doing is I'm testing for really tiny pieces of microplastics and how they travel all around us through the wind. So you can see it's really windy, and I'm really excited because this is amazing for fishing for microplastics. Hey everyone! So, guess what happened? When I was doing experiments in the lab, I heard this really loud noise outside, and I thought it was the weather, but it's beautiful outside. So, when I looked, I saw some visitors, and you can see right behind me there are some wild horses that came to hang out with me as I'm doing science. So, we're gonna go check them out. These horses have lived on Sable Island for hundreds of years, and they're known as Sable Island horses. And what makes these horses incredibly special is that they've adapted to life on the island, which means they hang out on the beach a lot, they go into the waves sometimes, and then they also hang around main station. I'm studying plastic pollution and microplastics, and one thing that I learn more and more being here is that plastics have an impact on everything, and understanding how plastics get to really remote islands like Sable Island is really important if we're going to do a better job at keeping these guys' home cleaner for them to live in.
Whoa, what an incredible look into Justine's life in the field. We just heard from Justine that plastic pollution has an impact on everything, and her mission is to understand how microplastics travel through the air to remote places like Sable Island. We also learned that microplastics are tiny particles that were once part of bigger pieces of plastic. But where does this plastic come from? Let's take a big step back and consider how much plastic we encounter in our everyday lives. Okay, students, I'd like you to put your detective hats on. Observe the area around where you're sitting right now. What can you find that is made of plastic? There may be a lot of things that are made of plastic just within your reach, so just grab one and hold it up. Okay, students, hold up or point to the item you found to show your teacher. Teachers, tell us what your students have by typing it in the chat bar. Once again, take a look around you. From where you are sitting, what can you reach that is made of plastic? On my desk here, I've got a little hair tie, which I use for wrapping up my plastic cables, which is, this is a cable I use to charge some of my devices. And I also, for some reason, have a 0% sulfate shampoo that is also 100% plastic wrapped, which is awful. I'm kind of bummed about that. All right, let's see what you guys have been finding. Oh man, there's a lot of plastic. We see some bottles, some plastic frogs from Leap Day, pencil boxes, lights. I see a lot of water bottles, pencil boxes, Ziploc bags. Yeah, we've all got that. Someone says a Nintendo Switch. That is like one of the only acceptable forms of plastic that I think we can all be happy about. I love a Nintendo Switch. I also have one. Supply basket, water bottle, headphones, box, pencils. It's plastic on our cameras. I mean, it's just everywhere. Glue sticks. Truth be told, I mean, it's just so crazy how many things are made of plastic. And I just want to say thank you guys for all your answers. Great detective work. I still see them coming in. And honestly, there's like not that many double answers. Like everything is plastic. Anyways, going forward, I am just so excited to have Justine here live with us to share more about her work.
Just to comment, you folks came up with such great answers for different types of plastic items. And like Gibbs said, plastic is absolutely everywhere. And we were chatting before behind the scenes with the Nat Geo crew. And you know what? Nobody guessed this one, but clothing. Clothing is also made of plastic. So if you can look, this is a horse themed shirt, very typical of Sable Island. Not as grungy as the fieldwork though. But what's really interesting with clothes, you think, there's only one type of plastic out there, but actually plastic is like super, super complex. You have this umbrella term of what plastic is, but then you have different types. And if you go into any of your clothes, you can check behind your tags. You might not be able to read it really well, but those little white tags on the back of your clothes will actually tell you what kind of plastic is there. And if you can read that over there, that says 100% polyester. And yeah, everyone's reaching behind them. I don't know if you can like flip your shirt the other way and then check what it is, but everyone's clothes are made of totally different materials. And like you read nutrition labels for food, you can actually read your clothes and see what they're made of, which is mind-blowing.
Yeah, that is kind of crazy. I just checked the tag on my shirt. Definitely made of plastic. I mean, it's on us. It's literally not just in our environment. It's literally something we carry with us as we go through. I mean, that's so interesting. And
Totally.
yeah, I understand that you're in a lab in
Mm.
Toronto analyzing the data that you collected on Sable Island. And
Mhm.
before we talk about the lab that you're in at the moment, can you tell us a little bit about the lab that you set up on Sable Island and how you collected your samples?
Totally. And all you folks in the room, you might realize that you might think of a scientist and picture a very fancy and sophisticated lab like this. And let me tell you, when you do field work as a National Geographic explorer, oftentimes you are working in bare basics next to nothing this fancy. So
Hmm.
work on Sable Island was really interesting because I actually went into a building that was built, I think, in the 60s. So it was really, really old. And what was crazy about this building was there was nothing except like a countertop that I had to work with. So it meant bringing all these trunks with me and setting up my own lab. And as a scientist, you have to be so flexible and willing to work in whatever conditions. That don't let the looks behind me deceive you. That yeah, you have to be really, really resourceful. And I'm really grateful to be able to show a clip on what I did out on Sable. Hey everybody, so we're on our next stage of our tour and I'm going to show you a little special spot for me, which is my own personal laboratory, and this is where I work on Sable Island. So you can see here, this little area is all mine. So after I have breakfast every single morning, I take this giant cooking pot, which is called a Nilo collector, and what's really cool about it is that when you open the lid and you put it outside, it actually collects microplastics. Like microplastics travel by wind and they can actually fall out from the sky straight into this cooking pot. And every day I take the cooking pot down here to the lab and I put the sample in these tiny little glass jars. And you can see they're not dirty. There's no really big chunks of plastic. But what's really cool is that when you look underneath a microscope, you can see a ton of different things. And that's why it's so important to look for really tiny pieces of plastic. Another way you can collect plastics isn't just from cooking pots, but also water bottles, which is really cool because that means you don't have to do science in a crazy way with really big equipment, but instead you can use cooking pots as well as water bottles. Another thing that's really cool and very sciencey is this, where I filter water. So I pour water from the sink in here and it comes out so clean, and it actually doesn't have any microplastic after I've done it, which means I can use this really clean water to make sure that I'm not putting any microplastics in my samples. Another really cool thing that I use is a notebook, and this is what scientists use all the time because when you're walking around, you want to record everything that you see. Changes in the weather, what kind of plastics you're seeing around your area, just to make sure that you have a really, really clear story about all the research that you're collecting. And another thing that scientists always need is a good tool set, because in case something breaks down, you need to fix it. And it's not just about doing fancy lab work. You have to be able to make sure that you're handy. You might think these guys here are part of my lunch, but they aren't. If you can guess what they are, they're actually the glass jars that I showed you. And they have all water and microplastics in them, and they're ready to be shipped back home. They're actually going on a helicopter in the next hour, which is really exciting. In this box here, these are all other samples that I've collected, all the very fancy water bottles, and they're all ready to go home too. This will tell you where exactly you are in the world, and this is really important because you want to know a lot about the geography of the place that you're studying, so always having a GPS tracker is key. And this is probably my favorite part, are these big boxes here because they look like giant treasure boxes. And what's really exciting about them is that you think you would find gold, but instead what you find are more water bottles and more glass jars. And that's how I begin my day every day, is going into the treasure box, getting the collection jars that I need to do sampling, getting cooking pots and water bottles, and being able to hang out in this really, really beautiful place called Sable Island.
Whoa, that is awesome. I love your journey as an explorer. I mean, your field lab, the environment, and the horses you showed us earlier, that is honestly so cool. Thank you so much for showing us all the tools you used and how you collected your samples. I'm waiting for my invite. I'd love to come over to Sable someday. Okay, students, before we hear more from Justine about what she does with next with those samples, I'm going to ask you to put your detective hats back on again. But this time, instead of looking for large pieces of plastic in your surroundings, we're going to take a look at much smaller pieces of plastic and see if you can identify what it is. All right. Take a picture or take a look at the picture on your screen. You can see there are different tiny objects next to a quarter. So you have a sense of how small or big they are. We are going to circle an object and see if you can guess what it is. Okay, detective hats on, let's start. What do you think this circle object is? Is it grass, B, fishing rope, C, a sword, or D, a plastic cup? Students, share your answers aloud with your teacher, and teachers, type your students' answers into the chat. And now let's take a look at some of your answers. From Avery Decker, I am seeing grass. From Luciana Shaw says grass. Mrs. Krause, second grader, says grass. I see grass from Levi. Teddy and Tyler Weeks both say sword. That sounds like an emphatic sword there. Layla says grass. Tanner says grass. Seeing a lot of grass. Not too many more swords coming out here. Anyone? Oh, fishing rope. There's a fishing rope in there. That's an interesting guess from Mr. Montgomery's class in LA. I'm seeing I'm seeing a lot of swords now. What happened, guys? It was all grass, now it's all swords. Cool. Well, I think these are some great guesses, and luckily for us, we have the expert here with us. So, Justine, can you tell us what we're looking at here?
Gibbs, I love the number of swords that came in. This is so much better than I'm not gonna say it's better than the first session, but everyone was guessing the boring plastic stuff. I mean, swords, gotta love it. But yeah, great guesses, everyone. And for those of you who said grass, to be honest with you, that's what we thought when we were picking up all these microplastics and looking at them through a microscope. But little do you know that it's actually fishing ropes. So the class in LA that guessed it, you were right. And you can see from
Nice.
these examples here really quickly that there's a lot of different colors of fishing rope, and sometimes they look really natural, especially the green ones, right? You think that it would come out of the earth or it would be natural based, but it takes a lot of detective work to, get that it actually is plastic once you get under a microscope.
That is crazy. I mean, okay. I would never guess it was fishing rope, but that's that first of all, great guess from the school in LA. And yeah, let's I think we're ready for another one. Shall we move
Let's do
on?
it. Oh yeah.
All right. Students, what do you think the circle object is this time? Is it A, popcorn, B, a cotton ball, C, styrofoam, or D, sand? Students, share your answers aloud with your teacher, and teachers, type your students' answers into the chat. All right, I'm getting a lot of C, styrofoam pellets from a lot of people, from WS Wildcats, Folks Ranch fifth graders, Avery Decker, Aaron, Tanner, Jackson. Teddy says sand, and so does Geo. Seeing a couple more styrofoams from Amina and Carlo. Katamas. Oh man, there's a lot of styrofoams in this one. No swords, but it seems like styrofoam from the group. Um, Justine, what do you think it is?
Oh, I
Or can you
love
tell us
it.
it
Nope,
is?
nobody
Yeah.
guessed popcorn. What's up with you folks? I was gonna say I was
Yeah,
craving
no.
craving popcorn in a movie after that one, but you know what? Believe it or not, you are right, most of you in the audience. It is styrofoam. And what's really funky about these plastics is they look almost edible, right? It kind of looks like food. And the one really interesting part of the detective work is trying to understand what that styrofoam was in the beginning. And, it wasn't until we found a larger takeout container. So when you go to restaurants with your friends or family and you have leftovers and they give you that plastic container, that's actually what it breaks up into, like after it's been out in the environment. So being a detective in this context is really important because you have to use your imagination. You have to think about what those microplastics look like when they're underneath the microscope, but then also what was their life beforehand, before they got into the environment and, put in the lakes, rivers, or oceans. So having an imagination as a detective is really, really important.
Mm.
And just reflecting on this larger side, so there's nothing circled here, but I want you all to guess, talk to each other and kind of guess what the other microplastics are. And you can shout out your answers, you can tell them to your teacher, but yeah, you can see some of them are really funky looking. I mean, like especially the ones at the top. If you can look at the screen and look at that really shiny bit, it almost looks a little crinkled, like it's seen some stuff in the environment and it's really beat down. And then there's another particle just underneath it that's actually white with, it almost looks like red letters. It took us a while to figure out what these plastics were, and it wasn't until we found food wrappers that we realized that these were microplastics that came from food wrappers that, yeah, snack bag piece, exactly, candy wrappers. You folks got it. You beat me to the punchline on that. These are all things that we use every day, and when we're on the go and we're having a snack, if you unwrap the inside of a snack bag, you can see that it's almost foily. So microplastics basically look like a whole bunch of different things. They don't all look the same. And it's really mind blowing because you constantly have to ask questions of what people are up to in the area you find it. And, what kind of materials are they using? Are they eating a lot of snacks near a cafeteria? And is that what gets out into the nature? And yeah, that's a great guess from Avery Decker. The white little strand, if you can look down, 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 right at the base of the picture where there's that white strand, that's actually a piece of plastic string. So dental floss is a good guess. You know what? Maybe maybe it might be that. Maybe we misguessed that one. So really good detective hats, everyone. So I want to share, so those were that basically all those slides prepared you to become plastic detectives. And now that you're a little bit in your training, we're going to take it up a notch. So this is actually fresh off the press. This is really exciting because this is actually an image that came from Sable Island in this very lab. So a couple days ago, my colleague Amber, which I'll introduce you to in a second, and I were using the microscope. And this is actually what microplastics from the air look like when you put it underneath the microscope. And can everyone see all those dark little splotches that kind of look like dirt? Those, yeah, so they're all over the screen and they kind of look like freckles. And then there's these weird, funky, clean part or clear particles that look transparent. Those are all what's left after we've gone through all the process in the lab. And basically what we're trying to do is understand, what are these particles? Are they actually plastic? Are they rocks? Are they grains of sand? Are they popcorn? So we're really trying to dive into what these particles are. And the orange little dude that you see in this in the bubble there, that's actually a piece of plastic, which is super cool because we found plastic on Sable Island from the air. So I really want to show you kind of a more behind the scenes view of what we're doing in the lab. So you can see there's all this equipment behind me. I'm not currently using any of it, but what we're using here is basically a fancy microscope. And I'll introduce you to Amber, who I'm working with. Everyone say hi to Amber. She's getting waves from all over. So Amber and I spend many, many hours in this lab processing microplastics. And this equipment is very, very special. What you see in here, it's called a Raman microscope. And basically in this little box is where all the laser action's going. So like I said, we zap little particles with lasers and we try to understand, what exactly they are. So laser action in here, this little cover is actually where our Sable Island samples are. And when you look through the scope, you can actually see the particles. But what's even better is it shows up on the screen. So what Amber's doing is really cool stuff. These little squiggles here, I don't know if you can see, these squiggly little lines are basically the material footprint of what what material is underneath the microscope. And every material on the planet has a specific squiggle. And basically you can determine what's a microplastic and what's organic or what's natural. And you kind of have to almost translate what those squiggles mean to find the answers of what trash you're looking at, which is so mind-blowing. And you can only do it with this machine. So that's basically our little behind the scenes tour. But I also want to show you, this is the micro stuff. One thing that's I'm really passionate about as a Nat Geo explorer is the big plastics. I really like all the marine debris and things that you find on beaches and like the things that are like in your face. And when I was on Sable, what was really cool was, there were like miles and miles of beach that people wouldn't really walk around and look for stuff. So during my lunch hour, I would just kind of hit the beach, pick up pieces of plastic, look at them, and then record what they are. And one thing that's really cool is you can use something called citizen science. Has anyone heard of that before? Hands up, maybe? I'm getting a lot of nods, a lot of hands. Cool. So citizen science is a way that you can map out all the plastics in the environment and basically track it. So if you take a look, I have my cell phone out, I'm looking at trash, and I was able to generate a map of plastics all over Sable Island. So it should come
Whoa.
up. Yeah. So this is just from a quick walk looking around, and all those little bubbles you see are numbers of pieces of debris that I found. And what's really cool is that you can get an understanding of what microplastics are in the environment from, going around and looking at again the bigger stuff like this broken car that was beach bound. But yeah, so you can map out your plastics there. And what's really cool is you can actually understand what types of categories you're finding. So the top items that I found on Sable tended to be hard plastics, which basically means anything that kind of makes that clicking sound. So like harder plastic toys, even chairs, for example, like any plastic that kind of like you can knock against it. And honestly, fishing rope was another big thing because it's an island in the middle of the ocean. So you definitely find a lot of fishing gear, but that's the kind of stuff you find on Sable. So you constantly have to do detective work, both with the tiny microplastics and the big stuff.
Man, I love the investigation and the style of investigation you're doing. I mean, going into the field, collecting all these things, and then going to this like super cool lab. I mean, despite having to, research plastic, which is bad for the environment, I mean, it must be quite exciting.
Oh, totally. And there's so many ways to look at plastics because, once they get in the environment, they just break up into really small bits. And you kind of have to have your detective hat on every stage of the life for that plastic.
Mm. Oh, that's so cool. Okay, students, we want to hear from you again. So let's be detectives one last time. What will you do to investigate plastic in your community? For example, Justine asks questions and tracks the plastic litter she sees in the Marine Debris Tracker app. Students, share your answers aloud with your teacher, and teachers, type your students' answers into the chat bar. All right. And the question here again is, what will you do to investigate the plastic pollution in your environment? Waiting to see some answers. I'll tell you what I would love to absolutely do. I mean, just looking now, I mean, you just told us about the whole, clothes having plastic pollution in them. I mean, I from now on will now make a very conscious effort to look at the clothes before I buy them to make sure that I don't buy something that has plastic in it that is just like in my neighborhood. Um, oh, here's some answers. Avery Decker says attach a GPS tracker. Justin says also use GPS. I mean, these are geographers, and I might say national geographers if I will. Um, the Folks Ranch fifth grade explorer says trash collection on our campus and adding it to the story map that they're making. Very cool. WMS Wildcat says patrol the riverside, patrol the city, and collect samples from the Ohio River. A WMS Wildcats might be your next citizen scientist. You might have to call them up. Mr. Montgomery's class in LA says walk along the beach and chart what I find. Gianna Smith says attach a GPS tracker or something small like that. That's a good one. Ooh, Aaron says use an AirTag. That's a cool idea. Carlo Medina Homeschool says, I would search for trash on my city with my siblings. Hey, company and conservation and and plastic debris, searching for plastic debris, that's a good combo. Mrs. Dallas Cortez class says, gather plastics around the school and graph what we find. That's a great way of combining science into into this plastic pollution problem. I like it. And then Luciana also says documented on the app. I mean, this plastic debris app is definitely a game changer because especially how how ubiquitous plastic is. It's everywhere. We need to definitely find ways to keep track of it. All right. Um, these are some fabulous answers, everyone. Absolutely great work. As per usual, you are always on the ball, on the money, and inspiring me. So thank you so much for sharing. Justine, can you tell us a little bit about what you think about these ideas? Curious to hear
Oh
your
man,
thoughts
Gibbs,
on them.
I'm on the same page as you. National Geographic Explorers in the room. The fact that you folks are thinking GPS trackers and air tags, like what? That's really, really cool. Let me know when you find results from that because I'm interested. But yeah, to be honest, folks, it doesn't take going out to a remote island in the middle of the ocean to be an explorer, to be a scientist. And mobile apps like Marine Debris Tracker are amazing because it gives you really, really high quality data. And if you're even just going out for a walk with your parents or your friends and you see trash, you can easily track it with this and it's free to use. It's really easy. You have like a virtual garbage can where you like just add numbers into it. And what's really cool is you can map out where you're seeing things because if you understand where plastic is coming from and where the leakage points are, then you can start recommending solutions. And I've heard of multiple Nat Geo teachers in classrooms that have found, where trash bins should be to improve waste collection. And what's really good
Ooh.
about that is that if we keep plastic out of the environment from the waste collection standpoint, if we put it in bags and we, put it to a dump in one place, then we reduce the risk of it ending up in our oceans because, inevitably it goes through rivers and all these different water systems. So we want to keep it out of the environment the best we can. Now, going out in your community is an amazing activity, and you can all be backyard explorers without having to go very far. And then, if you want to go to a remote island later on, totally groovy. But I would recommend getting those those air trackers on different plastics and seeing what you find.
Yeah, I mean, something that came out to me when hearing what you were saying is the
Mhm.
more we know about
Yep.
something, the better we can inform the people that manage our environment. So we can actually change how they treat our environment by just understanding what's going on in our surroundings.
Totally. And like, I mean, your schoolyards, you're outside your schools and your backyards and your public parks. This is all the environment. It doesn't mean going out into the environment doesn't mean going out to a mountain or a rainforest.
Mhm.
It means stepping outside your door and becoming a citizen science is a scientist is really, really important to taking that step to get people to care because everybody cares about where they live. We all want to keep a clean environment. So starting local is usually the best solution.
Oh, so cool. All right. Thank you, Justine, for that wonderful explainer and bringing us into the field with you, into your lab, to the amazing Sable Island. We learned so much about microplastics and how they travel through the air and what we can do to identify or reduce plastic pollution in our own environment. Now we are going to kick off the lovely Q&A portion of the show. And if you're watching online, send us your questions into the chat bar. We record them all as they're sent in, so please send in each question one time. Teachers, please let us know who's asking the questions so we can give your class or student a shout out. And if you're an on-screen guest, get ready with a nice loud voice, and I'll tell you when it's your turn. Next question comes from YouTube, and Jose is wondering, how long has plastic been in the world?
Ooh, great question. So plastics have actually been around for thousands of years. And can anyone guess where they originally came from nature? Think it's almost like it's really stretchy and you use it to like hold things together. Rubber bands, the rubber tree in South America. was actually one of the original sources of plastic, and indigenous communities would actually use it as a material for thousands of years. But what was really special about that type of plastic was it came from nature. It was actually the sap from a tree. And, it was really sustainable in the way that there wasn't too much of it, there was just the right amount. And, it actually had the ability to kind of go back into nature and be okay. But then around the late 1800s, so a couple hundred years ago, some guys in a laboratory said, hey, we need a material that, can have flexibility, that can be really strong, something that can replace all the need for, taking ivory from elephants, like their tusks, and different types of lumber for building materials. So what these scientists in the lab created a special type of plastic called bakelite. And then from there, other chemists started building more and more and more different types of plastics. And if you think about it like a cook in a kitchen, that's how chemistry works. Is someone came up with one recipe, and then another person and another, and then pretty soon we started seeing plastic all over the world. And this one is only the plastic that the main difference between the rubber that we found in the Amazon versus the one that was made in the lab is the lab one is synthetic. And that means that, it's not found in nature. It's something that's man-made.
Oh, wild. Okay.
Mhm.
I think we just have one more question for you,
Totally.
and that would be what final message you have for the future explorers out there watching today?
Okay, so I'm gonna sneak in two answers. First off, you folks just see me talking to you, and although I'm one explorer and part of the Nat Geo network, I never ever work alone. I always work with partners and really great collaborators. So you folks met Amber before. I couldn't do this work without her in the lab because it's a lot of hours on the microscope. So it's really good to find people you work well with. And the organizations I worked with the Sable Island Institute, Parks Canada, and also Renishaw, the company that's hosting me to do the science, is also a huge one. But one thing I want to encourage all of you based on our talk is I saw what good plastic detectives you are. You ask absolutely amazing questions that have blown me away. I've actually never heard a lot of them before. So keep on asking questions and
Mm.
dream big, dream really, really big. But remember, you don't have to be an explorer and go around the world to do things. You can do it in your backyard. And if you have dreams of travel, you can always do that later. But I think it's really, really important that you ask questions, you stay curious, and yeah, you just you get involved in something that you really care about, because we really need to protect our planet because we only have one. So thank you so much for being such great detectives, everyone.
Yeah, here, here. Thank you, Justine, for joining us today and inspiring us with your work and final message. And thank you to all the students for your thoughtful questions. And of course, thank you to the teachers for bringing your class to our show. It's already been such an exciting season of Explorer Classroom, and there's so much more ahead. So you can check out our event schedule and register for events at natgeoed.org/Explorer Classroom. When you register, you can request a chance to be featured up here on screen with us. Join us next Wednesday. I know, a different day of the week, but this one is worth mixing up your schedule. We'll meet with explorer and space environmentalist Moriba Jah, who monitors space debris like old satellites and rockets in an effort to understand the clutter that is orbiting our planet. Join to learn how he plans to make space safe, secure, and sustainable. Have a great day, everyone. Stay curious and keep exploring.